This video will take a look at accessing via user account a DECT base station that's registered to WebEx Calling. We're going to first start off by going to our WebEx Control Hub, going to Calling, Features, Manage for the DECT network. We're going to choose our DECT network we're focused on. In this case, it's called MyDBS210. And we need to actually use the chain ID. I'm going to blur a part of this number for obvious reasons. And before we go to the actual base station itself, let's take a look at what information is offered within Control Hub for the DECT base stations and also for the handsets. So at the bottom right here, we have two base stations in my environment. And also we have two handsets, so we'll take a look at the base station information. Okay, I'm going to blur most of the MAC address information. I'll leave the last two digits open. So we show here we have two registered DECT phones on the base station that ends with MAC address 6C. And it does give us some additional information here, view status. So these are going to be the two users that are registered to this base station. So we have John Smith user 1. For either of these users we can view status. It just shows it's registered. It doesn't really show us what firmware version the DECT handset has. It doesn't show the battery. It doesn't show the actual dBm, negative dBm value as far as how far away or how close the actual handset is to the base station. So these are different pieces of information we would want to log in to the respective base station as a user if we're troubleshooting, or as an administrator just to have knowledge what is the status of the actual DECT handsets. Okay, so we know here we see two different DECT handsets registered to this base station. Very limited information. It just basically tells us who the user is, if the status is registered or not, if we go up one level. So on the second base station that ends with a MAC address of Apple 6 or A6, there's no registered users currently. There's no handsets, I should say, that are associated currently. If you notice, there's no greater than symbol, so there's no additional information we can pull. So let's actually go and log into the base station. So the username we're going to use will be user. The actual password, let's take a look at how do we actually find the actual password. So we want to do a search for WebEx Calling DECT phone. The first item that you should come up across if you do a Google search should be this build and manage DECT network in Control Hub. If we go inside there, if you do Control F and you type in password and you go down, you should get this section right here that talks about you can access the device from HTTPS with a username, user, and the password for the access. And they list there'll be two different passwords. One will be for DBS210, which is what I'll be showing, and the second one will be for DBS110. So for the DBS210, the actual password will be Cisco with a capital C, chain ID, and the last character will be an exclamation point. And that's what I'll be leveraging here in a moment. If you had a DBS110, for accessing the DBS110 via the user account, it will be Cisco 123, all lowercase for Cisco, and then just 123. Fairly simple. So in this case, we're going to focus on the DBS210. I'm going to need to type in Cisco, capital C, use my chain ID, and then exclamation point, and that's what we'll do next. So I've already kind of copied that or created that from my Control Hub. So I've typed in Cisco, capital C. I'm going to blur out most of my chain ID except for the last two numbers, which are 39 and then exclamation point. So let's go ahead and copy that. We're going to go in here. This will be the IP address of one of my base stations. So one question might be, how do we find what the IP address of a base station is? There's a couple possible techniques you can use. If you have a handset that's associated to the actual base station, if you go ahead and you press on the 3 horizontal bar button top right corner, and you go to the gear symbol, also known as settings, on the handset, and you go down the menu to where it says status, this will actually query information from the base station that the actual handset is associated with, and it'll list the IP address. So for example, currently my DECT 6825 phone is associated to base station at IP address 192.168.1.83. So that's what we have on the screen currently. So I'm going to hit enter here. And we want to also do HTTPS. Okay. We're going to type in user for the username. And then for the password, just to be clear here, I am typing in, or in this case I'm copying in Cisco, capital C, and then our number from Control Hub. I'm just going to show the last 2 characters, 39, and then the last character is going to be exclamation point. We're going to click sign in, and this is going to sign us in. So here, a couple of the things this offers that Control Hub does not offer is right off the bat we can see what is the firmware version of the base station. We have 5-01-01, also known as 5.11. It also shows here the status with Control Hub. So you notice it's okay and it's okay. So there's 2 different resources or services, if you will, that it's registered with Control Hub here. It shows okay for both of those towards the bottom. It also shows you most recent reboot causes. I am running mine in a lab here, so I have had where I powered them down. So you notice mine says power loss, power loss, power loss, normal reboot, normal reboot, normal reboot. And you notice on the reboot events I had, there were not power losses. There were some IP changes. I was doing some changes in my environment and it needed to get a new IP address. Here there's no DHCP IP address being offered. Again, this is in a lab environment, so there's some changes I was doing on the switching side. But if you were troubleshooting, this may provide some potential valuable information. What were some of the most recent reboot events of the actual base station? So the next item of potential value is going to be the extensions. So this will show you currently what is associated with the space station. And we see we have 2 6825 phones here. Both phones have the 5-01-01, also known as 511 firmware, which is good. As of this recording of this video, that is actually the current firmware that is offered in WebEx Calling for the DECT phones. Okay, so one of the phones is 85% charge, which is great. I have another phone, 81%, and it's showing us charging, so this one's in a cradle. Both phones are within the vicinity of the actual base station, so we'll notice it's negative 52 dBm. So this kind of gives us fairly decent information. Typically this would not be enough information if you're needing to troubleshoot, specifically if you're doing multi-cell and you're having issues, things are not working correctly. If that is the situation, this is definitely a starting point. But what you would want to get is a temp admin password, and the way you would go about that is you would want to contact Cisco technical support, and there's going to be specific information. They're going to ask you org ID. Let me actually go back to Control Hub. So they're going to ask you, so let's go back here. So they're going to ask you about the actual DECT network name, your org ID, your chain ID. I'm going to be blurring out some of this information. Also, the first user that was deployed within this DECT network. In my case, you can see that is user number 1. The reason these are key pieces of information is the way the DECT systems are deployed and managed and controlled is quite different than the other devices that you may be accustomed to. And it takes additional effort for the WebEx support team to be able to go ahead and get the proper temp admin password credentials created. Okay, one last item we're going to look at is going to be the other base station, which does not have any DECT phones currently associated or registered to it, if you will. Okay, we're going to log in as before with the user credentials. Okay, so one thing you're going to notice is there's no information at the bottom here. And the reason being is the 2 DECT phones currently are not registered to this unit, as far as this unit is not doing the SIP transactions between WebEx Calling and the actual DECT handsets. This can be a little bit tricky if you're troubleshooting, because right now the question would be, is there issue with the space station or not? However, you can go to extensions and it will actually show the 2 DECT handsets as far as being 2 valid extensions. So if you notice, we have the 2 DECT handsets, 6825, 6825 as before, 5-01-01. The other one's the same way. Shows the battery level. This one is on a cradle charging. If you're needing to troubleshoot, definitely you would want to consider contacting Cisco technical support and requesting a temp admin password, as I mentioned earlier, with information you will need to provide them. In effort, you can log in and see exactly what's happening with multi-cell. If you only have one base station, obviously having the user account gives you a good amount of information. Again, not everything for troubleshooting, but very decent amount of information. With multi-cell, as you can tell from the home status page, it doesn't really indicate that the actual base station is talking to WebEx Calling. The reason being is that the actual communication does require a DECT handset to be using this specific base station for the actual SIP communication to be occurring from handset to WebEx Calling. If you just have a base station with no current associated handsets that's being used for communication to WebEx Calling, it really won't show anything on the status page. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to bring one of the handsets close by to that base station and see if we can see a change here in a few moments. Okay, what I did is I brought one of the DECT handsets nearby to the actual other, the .71 base station. If you notice, that is showing that it is an OK status and it's registered WebEx Calling. So this part can be very misleading, if you will, if there's no handsets registered or leveraging that specific base station for the SIP registration to WebEx Calling. Is the actual base station OK status or not? So this is definitely, if you have a multi-cell deployment and you're having issues, you would want to look at getting a temp admin password from the TAC support team. So this is definitely where, if you're having issues with multi-cell, you definitely would want to get a temp admin password so you can have more visibility in the troubleshooting efforts. But in any case, hopefully this gives you some visibility with a user level access, what you can see, and also if you're doing multi-cell on some of the patterns, they can be somewhat misleading. If there's no handsets that are utilizing that specific base station for the registration time you're viewing this page as far as the SIP identity status on this base station. Hopefully this video helps regarding how you can access the DECT base stations that are registered to WebEx Calling using a user account. Thank you for watching the video.